3 minutes after 10 is the time. Okay, if Rishi Sunak loses the general election, moves back to California and puts his children into college or school in America this September, I will give every single person listening to this program. Actually, I better be careful what I say now. Does Ofcom govern? If I say I give everyone a kiss, would that be weird? I give everyone one pence. I will eat my hat. All right. I mean, it is simply not going to happen. So we're going to have a sensible conversation about why Rishi Sunak called the election so early when it appears increasingly to have been an almost unbelievably bad move. But I'm not taking that answer. That's the one answer I am not taking, because I just think it's silly. There's no way that he's going to pack up and leave the country shortly after packing up and leaving Downing Street. I could be wrong. It has been known, but I will eat my hat on this one. And it is not a fruitful enough response to the central inquiry to justify inclusion, to justify involvement. It is 4 minutes after 10. So that is the question. Why do you think he called it so early? It took us all by surprise. We've got that thing. We need a word. I bet the Germans have got a word for it. It's a form of overthinking, but it's a little bit more than that. It's a combination of overthinking and subconscious deference. So even after seeing Boris Johnson and Liz Truss inhabit the highest office in the land, I think we still suffer from a sense that if you have become Prime Minister, you must be made of quite impressive stuff. I mean, the evidence to the contrary is absolutely incontrovertible now. There is no earthly way anybody could logically argue that in order to become Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, you have to be exceptional, because all you have to say in response to that claim is Liz and Truss, and it becomes immediately clear that you don't have to be exceptional at all, or perhaps exceptionally awful, but not exceptional in the sense of being well above average at stuff, at things, at politics. So we know that's not true, but I don't think you can shake that sense. I think we're all a little bit childlike, perhaps, when it comes to positions of high office. And remember that you are usually elected to that office. It's not like the kind of forelock-tugging cap doffing that accompanies royalty, for example, or the aristocracy, where people who have absolutely no right to our respect, really, or at least whose only claim to respect and high status is inherited privilege and accident of birth. So if we can be deferential to them, both consciously and subconsciously, or people given gongs and meaningless baubles, so we suddenly find ourselves tempted to genuflect before them or bend the metaphorical knee. The idea that we would still have in the back of our minds. And do you know what else I think we probably do? We probably think of politicians that did seem to command respect. So you might think of Margaret Thatcher, or you might think of Dennis Healey, or you might think of Michael Heseltine, or you might think of I mean, the list is pretty long. You might think of Tony Blair. That people who did seem to be exceptional, whether they were or not is a slightly different question. But the sense that if you have become Prime Minister or Chancellor of the Exchequer, or you have assumed high office, you're probably better at this than we are. Right? That's what you think, subconsciously. You're probably better at this than we are. So when Rishi Sunak called the election, I did that thing that the Germans probably have a word for, when I sort of thought to myself, well, I can't see much sense in this. This looks absolutely bonkers. What on earth is the lad playing at? But he must have a plan. I think the best example of what I'm describing came about at the beginning of COVID, didn't it? When we talked a lot about some of the decisions that Boris Johnson was taking, and we could see no rhyme or reason whatsoever. We could not see any rhyme or reason whatsoever. And Dominic Cummings, of course, who was the power behind the throne, he still had that reputation for being some sort of evil genius, which I don't think in retrospect he deserved at all. But at the time, we all thought he was a kind of like the Mekon out of the Dan Dare novel, comics, and he was, so there must be some secret massive master plan going on, but we're too dopey to see it. We're too slow to see it. Of course, there was no master plan. It subsequently emerged, largely due to the testimony of Dominic Cummings when he turned upon his former protégé Boris Johnson, and hell hath no fury like a senior advisor scorned. And so there was no master plan. And that is where I am again now. I don't think there was a master plan, but I can't help thinking that there must have been a plan of some sort. He didn't wake up that morning, did he, or go to bed the night before and just sort of have a chat with his wife and say, hey, I've got a good idea, I'll call an election in the morning. I think Macron did, by the way. I think Emmanuel Macron should have slept for at least one more night on his decision to call an election over in France, because that's beginning to look like a miscalculation on a scale that makes Rishi Sunak look sensible. We could be wrong. We'll find out shortly after the election here, what has happened in France, where the far right really are on the march. But the idea that Sunak was acting with a plan, or even just a sort of mitigation of risk, is one that I can't shake. So there won't be one reason, I don't think, but I would like to think that by 11 o'clock today, if we know what we're doing, we might have a better idea of why he's actually done it. Because as one writer in the Telegraph today, here you go, stop all the clocks, there's a decent comment piece on the opinion pages of the Daily Telegraph under the headline, and this will never be a contender for Unhinged, Sunak may have made the biggest electoral mistake in British history. And the argument I don't think works completely, that the situation would be getting better for the Tories in a few months' time. I don't know. I think the fact that we've had record numbers of small boat crossings, while not particularly interesting to huge swathes of the electorate, is of immense importance to the sort of Westminster media right-wing bubble. And of course the Faragists, who talk of little else when they are offered the opportunity to do so. So no planes to Rwanda have taken off, although he insists that they will soon. You can't campaign on it's going to happen soon, can you? Not when you've been in power for 14 years and you've essentially staked everything on a single policy. So I don't think things would necessarily have got better. I think the cost of living is baked in now. I think even with inflation coming down to manageable levels and interest rates possibly set to follow, growth has become one of those words that we hear a lot but don't really understand. The difference between growth overall and per capita growth is becoming, I think, more pertinent, more widely understood. But I just, the sense that the game was up, maybe, I don't know. In which case, why not leave it a little bit longer and go for the Micawber principle, the Mr. Micawber principle? Something will come up. A calculation that things are only going to get worse, if that was the calculation, I think looks wrong. So why did he call the election 5 weeks ago when he didn't have to? He still had months to go. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 11 minutes after 10. No Prime Minister has ever, some points of information, no Prime Minister has ever gone to the country 20 points behind in the opinion polls. And that's still roughly where they are. The gap's got a little bigger, but I can't quite see how 6 months from now that gap would have been measurably bigger than 20 points. You feel, don't you, that things have more or less plateaued? Sort of epic acts of God notwithstanding, I can't quite see Labour smashing through the 50% mark and rising. So I don't see how things could have got necessarily worse for them. And there is always that slim chance that things could have gone better. So what do you think explains Rishi Sunak's decision to call an election early? I know I said I didn't know, but I've got a hunch. And the thing about hunches is that you have to be careful not to let your hunch influence your analysis, not to try to fit the facts to your hunch. So I'm not going to tell you what my hunch is. I've told you in the past what my hunch is. It's not a particularly original hunch. I'm certainly not the only person who's got this hunch, but I'll tell you why it's an odd hunch. It's an odd hunch because in many ways it makes a mockery of everything that we do together every day. It makes a mockery of evidence-based analysis or policy-driven politics. It's a very, very personality-driven hunch. And I thought it in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way when it first happened. And then within a couple of days, I felt it crystallize. I felt my hunch move from the nebulous and theoretical into the plausible and actual. I began to think, oh, actually, I think that is the reason. I genuinely think that is the reason. And as the campaign has unfolded, as we have watched Sunak's campaign, we've seen misstep after misstep after disaster after misstep, my hunch has solidified still further. And my hunch is now close to a conviction. But I don't want to tell you what my hunch is first up this morning, because I want to create some room for you to tell me your ideally less hunchy and more evidence-based theories on why Rishi Sunak went so early. It looks as though if he'd waited 6 months, he'd have some positive figures to boast about in the context of the economy. He could have made much of the D-Day commemorations, the NATO meeting, a G7 summit. He could have really played the statesman on the world stage. Obviously, coming home early has rather undermined that in the context of the D-Day commemorations, but he could have done. The football might yet go well. Andy Murray might play at Wimbledon and do well in the doubles. Who knows? Who knows? But something might have come up. And so far it hasn't, and there's only 8 days left. So why on earth did he go 6 months earlier than he needed to? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Other stories that we will get around to today, I hope. Israel has announced, or rather Israel Army Radio has broadcast reports that the main phase of the Gaza operations are close to over. The IDF radio station has said within a few days it will be possible to announce that Hamas's Rafah brigade has been defeated and the intensive phase of ground maneuver all over Gaza has been definitively completed. We have no way of measuring that, not least because Israel won't let proper journalists into the Gaza Strip. But I do want to talk about what has changed in our views of Israel in particular and that part of the world in general as a consequence of Benjamin Netanyahu's murderous rampage through the Gaza Strip, which followed fast upon Hamas's murderous rampage through southern Israel. The difference in casualty is almost immeasurable, of course, but in terms of public opinion or international opinion, I'm fascinated and terrified by how much damage Benjamin Netanyahu has done to Israel's standing in the world. We'll get onto that a little later in the programme. And then there's an amazing story about the point at which people from poorer backgrounds start sliding back academically. It's heartbreaking to think about that. I've got a story I'll share with you about Sebastian Coe, of all people, but it's one of those stories I heard as a relatively young man and it's never left me. But when you know you're quite clever and you feel yourself sliding back from your peers, your contemporaries, because of your domestic circumstances or because of your socio-economic situation. We'll probably have a look at that later. 16 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Why did Rishi Sunak go so early when he didn't need to and it's all going so badly? Your thoughts after this? 19 minutes after 10. It currently looks like the biggest electoral mistake in British history. And, of course, the thing about mistakes is that they are optional. If he'd waited until the end of the year to call an election, he would have had no choice. So you might be able to describe a retrospective mistake. You could say, oh, he should have gone early. But that doesn't carry anything like the weight of making a conscious decision to do something you don't have to do and then floundering, failing. So why did Rishi Sunak go so early? 10:19 is the time. Ken's in Leigh-on-Sea. Ken, what do you think? No, John's in Weston-super-Mare. Look at that, we're staying on the coast. John, what do you think?
I've got a theory that this is much more to do with Graham Brady and his letters that may have been going in to depose Rishi Sunak. And I know that it's pure speculation.
Everything's pure speculation today, mate. No problem with that.
And I just think that you speak as though it was a pure controlled decision by Rishi Sunak, potentially, but I don't think it was. And I think I was speaking to producer, and I know that Graham Brady is never going to say, oh, X number of letters were going in. But
he talks to the Prime Minister about how fraught that situation may be, because these are, I think, the reasons why Truss walks the plank, or why. I mean, with Boris Johnson, it was an avalanche of very public resignations. Pretty much everybody in his government was resigning in public by the end. But certainly the Prime Minister will be given the lie of the land by the chairman of the 1922 committee. And I mean, who here could say that the Conservative Party in its current iteration isn't mad enough to have tried to get rid of another leader before the general election?
Well, I use the word dysfunctional. They are utterly and entirely...
That's very polite.
Yeah. Well, it takes one to know one.
Yes.
And none of it has been thought through or strategized. I think I was saying to my partner yesterday, look at some of the decisions that have been made by Sunak's team, like during the general election campaign. None of it speaks to grand strategy or clever thinking, but it does speak to people who are, to be fair to them, and this is me being really generous, people who are under immense pressure.
Yes.
And when people are under immense pressure, they make very poor decisions. Like, take D-Day. You can list whatever, however many things you want to list.
And that would include calling the election, would it?
Yeah, because if you look at not more than the optics, but
I like this.
How would it look to the country if the Conservative Party then went through another leadership election when they have the deadline of January 2025 to have a general election?
What Disney film contains a principle to which you are unwittingly subscribing?
I'm terrible at Disney films, James.
It's Frozen.
You know what? I was saying to someone yesterday, I've never seen Frozen.
You must see Frozen. It's a beautiful film. But the troll principle, which Dan in Torquay has reminded me of, is that people make bad decisions when they're mad or scared or stressed.
Yeah.
And Dan goes on, I think Sunak has been living in a mad, and evidenced on recent TV appearances, scared. There must be a deep fear that needs to be contained, controlled when running a country, and stressed. Anyone dealing with the Tories' dysfunction at the moment would be stressed, although he didn't use the word dysfunction. Since he took office, he's used to controlling spreadsheets and not leading people. He's baked. And so there you go, the troll principle of Frozen. Or, to give John in Weston-super-Mare his dues, the jump before he was pushed principle. He thought that they were gathering, that they were gathering behind him. So he got out.
I think Sunak's had a very bad toothache for a long time.
Yes.
And he's unwilling to go to the dentist. And then push came to shove, and it was like, let's rip this out. Yeah,
well, I've had that message from a friend. Indeed, why put off the inevitable? Get it over with. Rip off the plaster. Get on with it and move on. 23 minutes after 10 is the time, which is perilously close to my hunch, which I think everyone's guessed anyway. So I don't know why I was trying to build up any tension about that. But I'll carry on. In for a penny, in for a pound. I'm not telling you what my hunch is, not yet. Ken is in Leigh-on-Sea. Ken, where were you? I came to you a minute ago. What happened?
Don't go there. Stupidity on my behalf. Anyway, I'm here.
All right, Ken.
Right.
That's a relief.
I agree with almost everything the last person said.
Oh.
But being rational political analyst rather than my emotional thing.
Yes.
If you were to go back to just before the election was called and look at the average polls, not just one poll, but the average, and you were to put a ruler on the paper, then the Tories have been going down steadily for a long time. Reform were going up steadily. They were still a long way behind.
Yeah.
But if you looked at that, sometime in July or August, he was worried they would overtake them.
Do you think?
And therefore, by October, he was scared Reform would be 4 or 5 ahead of them. And once they're 4 or 5 ahead, political Canadian-style meltdown. Unfortunately for him, if you look at the graphs, since the election, Reform have gone up sharply, the Tories have gone down sharply, and now it looks like by a general election they could be that far behind. I think he was trying to avoid the long, hot summer where they knew there was nothing good coming.
Yeah.
At the best, things were going to flatline.
I'm just looking at the lines.
There wasn't going to be money for a giveaway in October budget, but that would have been irrelevant anyway. because they'd have been toast then.
So this is, I mean, I think the numbers support you. With or without Farage returning to the fray, reform is likely to benefit from small boat crossings, isn't it? And they must have known that they were going to happen over the course of the summer, despite their protestations to the contrary or claims that the Rwanda plan was going to work as some sort of deterrent. I think we were in record-breaking territory yesterday. But this fascinates me, and I don't know whether it is the right tactic or not, but they've gone all in on trying to stop hemorrhaging to the right, haven't they? They've completely abandoned any attempts to recruit or even retain more moderate conservatives, more centrist conservatives.
He doesn't want to go down in history as a person who killed the Tory party. He was hoping... I mean, Starmer's been like Boycott as his best stroke worst. He's played. They have only had 2 wobbles of a minor level in the whole campaign.
Yeah.
One that really frustrates me about Corbyn, all he's got to say is collective responsibility.
Yeah.
When you're in a cabinet, you've got to give support to the leader. It wasn't wholehearted. Possibly I should have left. I might have made a mistake. But in fact, that doesn't seem to have affected him.
No.
And the other thing is Diane Abbott, again,
yes.
But they only took a day or 2 to sort it out, whereas Tory High Command are taking 6 days to sort out what colour paper to use.
I like the boycott. I like the boycott analogy. He might not have scored a lot of runs, but he's been at the crease for 3.5 days.
And he's done nothing, has he?
No.
He's not put a foot wrong. I mean, he knows his left wing are quiet. They're saying nothing. They're desperate for power. They're shutting up. And another thing is, the client media, Sunak thought he could rely on them.
That's probably part of the calculation as well, actually.
The client media are fighting the next leadership election.
Some parts of them are, and certainly Farage's comments, his apologism for Putin and using the European Union as some sort of source of Putin's decision to invade Ukraine has turned even the Daily Mail quite strongly against him. But that notwithstanding, the support for Sunak from the usual sources has been notably muted, if not silent. Speaking of muted, Ken, what happened at the beginning of this call?
I put it too close to my ear. I'm not very good with mobiles.
It's 28 after 10. Well, you're very good at politics, so thank you for that. So you've got there the fear of reform, to which you might add the hope of second guessing Nigel Farage, the idea that if he returns, they get a boost in the polling numbers. They certainly get a boost in the amount of media coverage that they get. Because the media has learned absolutely nothing about promoting populism, if you like, over evidence or over proper policy. But there we are. The attempt that failed as well. So, I mean, the thing is, we could come up with a theory that would be correct. That is why they did it, but it didn't work. And that's probably going to be the most likely conclusion. 28 minutes after 10. Mike's in Tooting. Mike, what do you think?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello.
Yeah, if I'm right about this, it's the first time I support Rishi Sunak, the first and only time.
Go on.
I'm the one who lost faith in him 2 minutes into his first speech outside Downing Street,
yes.
When immediately after the integrity, professionalism, accountability, he started praising Boris Johnson. That was it for me.
Fair enough.
He just resigned from his cabinet, for God's sake. Anyway.
Yeah.
The thing is that after Boris Johnson left, they put Rishi up against the village idiot. And
that's a little unkind, but I mean, for people who need subtitles, you're talking about Liz Truss.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I'm not sorry I said that.
Carry on.
And, it was pretty obvious to most people that 6,000, white conservative members of the Conservative Party were going to vote for her and not him. And that's exactly what happened. Since then, since he became Prime Minister, he's been very badly treated, at least in my view, by the Conservatives. And we know how petulant he can be.
We do now. We didn't before, did we? But we certainly do now.
No, we didn't. We do now. And I don't know what happened, but something's just snapped. He knew they were going to lose anyway, and he's just said, look, basically, I can't say the word I want to say, but,
Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Yeah, enough is enough.
So
I've had enough. I've had enough of you. Sort this out for yourselves.
He liked the job, but he likes the job, but not the party. In other words, the party, he feels let down by the party, which would have begun when he had the first setback of his life, which, of course, was losing to Liz Truss. The first time in his life, really, as Beth Rigby on Sky News, I think, pointed out, that he just has no relationship or familiarity with failure. So those seeds there would be sown, and then the subsequent treatment that he received from the Parliamentary Conservative Party, as opposed to the broader membership, has slowly sort of coalesced into a deep dislike of his own party, or disdain for. I like it, Mike.
I was more furious with him when he called this election than his own party.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's very true as well. I mean, a Yabu sucks theory almost to his colleagues. I mean, again, you have to dig pretty deep to find people who were enthusiastic about it at the time. Michael Gove came out and said something about he who dares wins, sounding, I think, a little bit more like Del Boy than like a member of the SAS. He who dares wins, Rodney. He who dares wins. But Michael Gove, of course, was prepared to come on this radio station and at least begin an attempt to claim that he had full support for Dominic Cummings, because he too often goes for drives in order to test his eyesight. But it's a wonderful moment, actually, when he was on with Nick. You can hear the confidence, the wind disappear from Michael Gove's sails live on air as he realises that even he is not unprincipled enough to continue down the path that he'd begun down, i.e. claiming that he too goes for drives in order to test his eyesight. So when Michael Gove's the only man coming out saying something like who dares wins, you've probably got a bigger problem than you realise. It's 10:32, couple of phone lines free now, 0345 6060 973. Why do you think Rishi Sunak went so early when it has all subsequently gone so wrong? Thomas Watts has your headlines. The problem, of course, with vacuums is that you have really no control or no say over what moves into the space created by a vacuum. So Rishi Sunak has never really, I don't think, explained why he called the election early. There have been sort of nods towards economic improvement, but I think the big joke, it's almost like a political tombstone, isn't it? Integrity, professionalism and accountability. But he can't really claim credit for inflation coming down, because when inflation went through the roof, he was absolutely adamant that it had nothing whatsoever to do with him. So the reasons for going early are in the realms of speculation, although some speculations, of course, are more solid than others. Did he jump before he was pushed? The sort of growing dissatisfaction in the ranks, and the ranks were febrile. They still are. It's not really a Conservative Party in any recognisable sense, as in a homogenous political force. A party in which relative moderates can sit alongside complete headbangers. And politics has always been susceptible to that sort of scenario, but the headbangers are normally kept either on a tight leash or on the other side of the building. Post-Brexit, and to a certain degree pre-Brexit, the Tory headbangers took over the asylum, and the moderates, whoever they are these days, people often talk about Tom Tugendhat, don't they? But the moderates are in abeyance. So what is the party that he leads? Would they have been mad enough to topple yet another leader going into a general election with their fourth leader since the last election? The fear of reform. But again, I mean, is that the correct calculation? Trying to stop hemorrhaging to the right as opposed to trying to return to the sensible centre? Job over party. I like Mike's analysis that he kind of reached a point where he had no respect or affection for the people around him. And then you've got the petulance that has emerged on an epic scale, coupled with the first experiences of failure. I mean, I don't mean this as a criticism. I don't envy it, because I don't think it's a very nice way to live, precisely because of what follows when you actually encounter failure. Unless you manage to get all the way to the finish line without ever having had to deal with failure or deal with shame or deal with embarrassment. Rishi Sunak's life has been gilded in incredible ways. And then he got beaten by Liz Truss, not by Margaret Thatcher, but by Liz Truss, someone he would know well, someone whose abilities he would have a clear picture of. And that maybe just gives some sort of shift in his internal chemistry with regard to the Conservative Party membership. He knows that they preferred Liz Truss to him. He knows that there's probably some racism involved in that decision from some of the people who would have cast a vote. It's pretty hard to see objectively how anyone would favour Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak on paper when one was coming out of the Trade Department and one was coming out of the Treasury. I don't know. And then the disloyalty, the backbiting, the sniping, which again, he hadn't been in Parliament long enough to be immersed in, or even to be subjected to, because his rise to Chancellor was sort of without trace. And the furlough gave him this latest chapter in a life of gilded success, in a life of almost unchallenged success. Furlough at the time was widely applauded, widely greeted. He was sort of some sort of messiah. So his whole life's been like that. Head boy, university, hedge funds, huge amounts of money. Rich as Croesus amounts of money. None of this is a criticism. This is just counting. And then he lost to Liz Truss after having probably the biggest political PR success of the last 10 years with the furlough scheme. And even Eat Out to Help Out at the time was applauded, even though it turned out to have killed people. 10:39 is the time. Max is in Beckenham. Max, what do you think?
An hour.
Hello.
Well, an hour, it'll be.
Is it? Okay. In your own time, Max.
Oh, hi. Sorry about that.
That's all right. What will be an hour? Have you got something in the oven?
Hi, Jake. No, I'm just covering a friend of mine who's in Australia. He runs a cobbler's in Penge, and I'm just in here covering for him while he's...
so what, you can just do a little bit of cobbling on the side, can you? Or are you a retired cobbler?
No, I'm a retired national manager for a home improvement company.
Well, how are you going to fix that lady's shoes then if you've got no cobbling experience?
Yeah, we've got someone we can take them to do the job for them. So
nice
yeah,
one.
But all angles are covered.
I'm glad to hear it, Max. I'm glad to hear it. Don't let me detain you for too long because you've only got an hour to get those shoes sorted out.
Yeah, right.
Go on, what's on your mind?
It's this Sunak situation. I think it's very simple. I think it's just a matter of self-preservation and trying to save a bit of face. I think he realised he hasn't got the support. I think if he'd called an election in November, I think they'd have ousted him because he just really isn't the
You don't think he would have lasted to the end of the year with his own colleagues, with his own party?
Well, I don't think he's got any support, has he?
Not really.
The D-Day ceremony, you know, he made a decision that wasn't his decision to make. It was our decision, you know, the D-Day ceremony, and he should never have left, and he should never have been advised to leave either. And I think they're rats on a sinking ship. I think he knows that after the election he is going to lose his seat, and I think
he didn't know that when he didn't know that when he called the election,
I think he did.
No way. I mean that was one of the safest seats in the country. But the broader point you make probably works. This sense of
I think he knew that if he called an election for November, he'd be ousted, and they put someone with a bit more vigour, someone like Boris, who could have announced the election in the rain with a lot of vigour and a lot of guffaw and got away with it. And so he's decided, I think, that if he...
Well, you're talking about sustaining the myth in a way, keeping that balloon, because that balloon burst when Johnson was in Downing Street. Truss came along and people got nostalgic for the balloon. And then Sunak arrived with a very managerial demeanour and someone who doesn't have a base, if you like, or a tribal support in the party. And so there would have been people, I think Dorries had finally left by then, but there would have been people who would have said, well, let's go back to Johnson because he's the best snake oil salesman we've got. Whereas Sunak can't sell snake oil. He's tried on occasion, but he can't do it. I was hoping your contribution would be less good. Do you know why?
Why?
So that I could just say cobblers.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. I promise not to tell your mate in Australia that you've been gabbing on the radio when you should have been fixing heels or indeed cutting keys. 10:42 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Richard is in Chilcompton. Good, sounds delightful. In Somerset. Richard, what would you like to say?
Oh, it is delightful. Good morning, James.
I think I'm heading for Somerset this weekend, or it could be the one after. I'm not sure. I hope the weather holds. Sorry, carry on, Richard.
No, okay. Well, this weekend, you don't want to be anywhere near me at the moment because we've got Glastonbury happening this weekend.
God, of course, yeah.
The roads will be a nightmare. But anyway, what I rang in to say was I think Rwanda has to be a factor in the timing. Because the first flights were not taking off until, I believe, the end of July. So if they waited until after that, and it will become blindingly obvious that it's not going to work, then their stock will be even lower than it already is. So get in. So he
had reliable legal advice that they weren't going to be able to do it without breaking or changing the law. But this is all speaks to the hemorrhaging to the right, doesn't it? The idea that support for Farage and Reform and Richard Tyson, the rest of them, would increase with the boats coming across. There's not actually that much evidence that that's true. The boats seem to be a sort of constant noise in the background. Record-breaking figures this week, not getting the coverage they would have got a month ago because we're in the campaign. But, of course, we wouldn't have been in the campaign, would we, if he hadn't called the election, and therefore the stories would have been much bigger. So we knew probably that the flights were not going to take off anytime soon. He's probably fibbing when he says they're going to take off shortly after the election.
Quite, yeah. That's the thing, yeah.
And the public, the element of the public that he seems to care exclusively about, care passionately about the small boats.
It's all they have, isn't it? I mean, Rwanda was literally the last vestige of hope that they had.
Yes.
It's the only thing they had left to try. So
it could be, yeah. No, I think you might be right. The only calculation in terms of achievable policies or specific goals would be Rwanda. Stake the house on it, despite thinking it was a rubbish idea. And that, in many ways, thank you, Richard. I'm going to text my wife in a minute and ask if we've remembered Glastonbury with our plans, if it is this weekend that we're going to start. The last thing I want to do is spend the entire weekend stuck in a car. So thank you for the heads up. I think that sums up a much broader malaise, the idea that Rwanda is the policy on which everything is hung. And Rwanda was invented by Boris Johnson in order to distract attention from his latest scandal, and considered to be a terrible idea by Rishi Sunak, largely on financial grounds, and a word I don't like saying on the radio, so I won't say it. Although the woman who I consider to be arguably the finest broadcaster in the land, Michelle Hussein, she said it several times on the radio, but Eleanor tells me I'm not allowed to say it. But James cleverly described the Rwanda plan as being like the excrement from a bat. Yeah, you can. So but I don't. Anyway, I'm not going to say it. But that's what the Tory party has ended up being: an organisation that has staked everything on a policy that its most senior salesmen think is cobblers. 10:48 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I hadn't forgotten, Pete, that Glastonbury was coming up. I'd forgotten that I was going to Somerset. All right, so get off my case. I've always been quite open for, he says, I thought that was a compulsory weekend away for middle-class folk, Pete in Stamford. I've never been to Glastonbury. What are you going to do, sue me? Why have I never been to Glastonbury? Because I don't like mud. It was 1 year I could have gone when I was a showbiz editor, and they'd have put me up in the luxury that I deserve. But I do you know, I think I might have told my editor I was there and actually filed copy as if I was at Glastonbury while staying in Earl's Court and just watching it all on the telly. But I may be imagining that. That may be part of the legend, part of the myth rather than the reality. 10:49 is the time. Speaking of legends, speaking of myths, I still haven't shared with you my hunch. But I have to tell you, and a lot of nibbling at the edges of my hunch has unfolded already on the programme. But I am going to hit sort of 3-4 minutes to 11 in 7 or 8 minutes time, and unless something extraordinary happens between now and then, I would, were I a betting man, I would put all my money on my hunch being correct. We'll never know the answer unless he writes some memoirs and tells the truth. But I don't think we've heard a better theory than my hunch. But you already know what my hunch is, unless, of course, you don't, in which case you'll find out shortly. Steve's in Brentford, God's own country. Steve, what would you like to say?
Hi, first time caller to you. Good morning.
Welcome. Did you go to the Canal Festival at the weekend, Steve?
I certainly did.
Wasn't that an excitement, eh? Wasn't that an excitement?
It was absolutely brilliant. I would have been playing, but unfortunately, the stage where I was playing, they did it as a duo this time. But normally I play there.
Do you?
Anyway, look.
Well, I'll look out for you next time.
Good on you. Well, hopefully I'll be there next time. I've got a theory, slightly off sort of left field.
Yes.
Basically, a bit depressing. I think the war in Ukraine is likely to escalate, or there's a chance it'll escalate. And I really don't think Sunak, being the fourth prime minister with no credibility, but basically a pretty nice guy, wanted to go into that situation with a government who is clearly unpopular. And I think he probably had a chat with people in the intelligence services and the military who agreed, call an election, get a government with a decent mandate, and a prime minister who's basically a good guy. I mean,
so this is country before party kind of stuff, then?
Well, I think so. I think it is, because what with American weapons being used, and you need American people to service those. I mean, let's leave it at that. And also people like Elwood saying we should have boots on the ground, Macron saying we should have boots on the ground, the head of NATO saying we should have boots on the ground. It's going to escalate, probably, and it could very well happen before January, when you would have had to hold an election. And getting it out of the way now, the Tories were going to lose.
But why did he want to be Prime Minister then, if he didn't want to be Prime Minister during a war?
Well, because when you're Prime Minister in normal times, you can get away with having very little credibility. But when things get serious like this, you really need, and so do the people who need, because after all, that means we're talking already about ludicrous things like national service, call up, all this stuff.
I've forgotten about that,
Yeah, the drums are rumbling. And I do believe that he didn't want to be without... Sure, if he'd had a massive majority, if he knew the Tories were going to win, the Tories were never going to win the election. Labour were always going to win, failing a complete meltdown, which...
So you're going for the events, dear boy, events.
Yes, you could put it like that. I think it is, and I think the war is escalating. There's no chance of negotiation. It's gone beyond that.
Yes.
And rightly or wrongly, it's now we're. Anyway,
I don't think I agree with you, but I'm engaged in your.
I hope I'm horribly wrong.
Of course. Well, welcome to my world.
Have a beer at the next Canal Festival. We can have a laugh.
I look forward to it. What genre do you play?
Well, I play in various blues bands around here.
So you would have been on the bit round by the bridge, on the bit by Syracuse, not on the big stage in the marketplace. You'd have been on the.
No. We were the year before last, but with another band, I was supposed to be on that stage. They were first on, and they decided to do it as a duo because the stage was very small.
Oh, I see. So you're crikey. Well,
Hmm?
you got nixed then. You got dropped.
I got dropped by my own band. We were heartbroken, me and the drummer. We got
absolutely outrageous. Oh, God. Well, I'm glad you did, and next time I shall join you. 10:53 is the time. Turning into an absolutely beautiful part of London, I have to tell you, Brentford. It is. I jewel in the crown of Hounslow. Josh is in Chiswick, which is fast becoming the sort of poor relation of Brentford as we stay in West London. Josh, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that I've been fascinated by all these sort of psychological assessments of Sunak and why he went. Mine is a bit more pragmatic.
Yeah.
Then I think he just thought the only element of advantage he had left was surprise.
Yeah.
So by going early, he was hoping to keep Labour on the wrong foot. But the problem is his party seemed to be surprised and wrong-footed by his decision as well. And you haven't got much else to do in opposition than prepare for an election. So, Labour were ready.
I mean, if that was the plan, then it was an absolutely disastrous miscalculation, wasn't it? Because he seemed to annoy his own party much more than he wrong-footed the Labour Party.
Yes. But I think he felt like it was all, the polls were going a certain way. I mean, he knew the inflation numbers, so it would be one of his, 5 promises he had?
Yes, and he thought he'd be able to dance around a bit more on that, do more of a lap of honour, and hope that everybody forgot to point out that when inflation rocketed, he claimed it had nothing to do with him.
Quite right, yeah. And I think I read somewhere also that They think the inflation might go back up again in August, in the autumn for a bit, and then come back down. So he might have been sort of worried about that too, and that sort of final plank being removed.
With a couple of exceptions, it's almost as if everything could be true today, couldn't it? All of these things could be contributing factors to a momentum that eventually pushed him over the line. It's unlikely. It's not going to be a single thing, but if they're sitting around the table and somebody says, reform, and somebody else says, and also we'll take Labour by surprise, and so slowly the enthusiasm for the idea begins to build. It could well be that. None of this actually necessarily plays into my hunch, which I promise, remember to share before the 11 o'clock news. But we've got time for at least one more call before that. Thank you, Josh. I can't believe you didn't rise to my bait about Brentford now being the superior cousin to Chiswick.
I'm on the border of Chiswick and Acton, James. So,
so you're a northerner.
Fair enough. I take it where I can.
You're humble. Staying out of this one.
I'm humble. I'm not part of the sort of glitterati of West London, unfortunately. So
the Brentford glitterati. There's a phrase you don't hear very often. 10:56 is the time. Mohammed is in Stratford. Mohammed, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Mohammed.
I think he was running scared. I think he had no support. He thought, let's go. Inflation's down. I've made enough money from my father-in-law. Infosys has got 50% more contracts.
I don't think that. I don't think that's fair. I think Infosys would have probably done all right without Rishi Sunak being Prime Minister.
They've been doing pretty good.
No, but the suggestion that he became Prime Minister in order to push even more business in the direction of Infosys, that just sounds tinfoil hat, doesn't it?
Well, I'll let you find out the figures.
I've seen the figures, but Infosys was already one of the biggest companies in the world. The idea that they needed extra help. But anyway, let's park that one. The rest is a sort of sum of all its parts, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he had no support. Personal life, if you get it over and done with by July, in September his kids can start school and be settled again instead of being in London, or if they're not going to live in London anymore.
They'll all move back to Yorkshire.
They'll go back to Yorkshire, and then he can just go back to his own, quieter life again.
Resume some sort of normal existence. You are very close. I like this. You're the perfect bridge, actually, from everything that's gone before, which you've kind of had a little bite of many of the other suggestions, and what is still my overarching conclusion. Genuinely, my overarching conclusion is that he has just had enough. For whatever reason, and we could tick off all of them. He's had enough of having to pander to the racist right, which of course is always going to come back during an election time, or during times of high refugee activity, or during times of poor economic performance. The racist right is always there, waiting to blame everything on immigrants. He's had enough of doing that, not least, of course, because he is a member of an ethnic minority. So having to pander to the racist right must have a sort of psychic toll that I can only imagine. The disloyalty from his own party, the constant sniping in the background, the incompetence surrounding him, all of these things. But crucially, just that experience of failure, losing to Liz Truss, albeit that he got the prize in the end, would have had a profound effect upon him, changed the way that he looked at the world. And finally, just looking at what success would involve. What would success look like? Minimising the scale of the defeat, limping over the line, possibly in some unforeseen circumstances with a victory. Why would he want to continue to be leader of the Conservative Party? Answer, he wouldn't. And prior to the election, why would he want to continue to be Prime Minister? Answer, he wouldn't. And that is where I would put my cross. That is where I would place my bet, is that him and his wife had a conversation. And I wouldn't be surprised if she said, you don't have to do this anymore. You don't have to do this anymore. You could just call an election. We could be out by the second week in July. It could all be over. It'd be someone else's problem. The country will be Keir Starmer's problem, and the unmanageable Conservative Party will be someone else's problem. As yet unspecified who. And given everything that we've just been talking about, and the salience of all of it, I think he sat there and went, oh my gosh, you're right. 3 minutes after 11 is the time. Robert Peston said something very interesting yesterday about the Labour MP who's been suspended for placing a bet on himself. It's quite an interesting moment, this, in terms of leadership credentials, because Rishi Sunak took the best part of a fortnight to suspend people who clearly needed to be suspended, and Keir Starmer took about 10 minutes to suspend someone who probably didn't need to be suspended. I mean, at first glance, placing a bet on yourself in your own constituency to lose looks pretty awful. But if you look at the details of that constituency, literally nobody expected the fella to win. So it's a weird bet, but it's not a dodgy one. It's not a sinister one. Betting using inside information on when the election date is going to be is an offence of a different magnitude. But Starmer sacked the fella immediately. Starmer binned him off absolutely immediately. And so the message that sends out is one of ruthlessness. I think, and we're not going to talk about this hour because I don't think there's much else to say, but I think that Starmer has I don't know whether it's true in this case, but it's certainly true in previous cases. Starmer is at his most petulant, for want of a better word, when it comes to probity, when it comes to standards. He's so impatient with people who have done something that is morally questionable. I guess this comes from his time at the DPP, but that idea, you see it, I mean, the disdain, it came across in one of the debates, that the absolute disgust that he had for Boris Johnson's relationship with the truth or relationship with basic morality. If you're a Labour politician and you put a foot wrong under Keir Starmer, if he becomes Prime Minister, I think you're going to be toast quicker than you can say Rishi Sunak took a fortnight to suspend anyone during this latest scandal, or the best part of a fortnight. It's interesting. It's 5 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Still think it was the right thing to do. I mean, placing a bet on yourself in a constituency is a pant-wettingly stupid thing to do, even if the odds must have been, 1 to 20 or something like that. But it's such a silly thing to do. I don't think that the Gambling Commission will reach the same conclusion in all of these cases, and people who are not found to have committed offences by the Gambling Commission may have a grievance about being suspended while inquiries went on, but that's not the calculation that Keir Starmer is making at the moment. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. Right, we haven't done this for a long time. There's almost a phone-in to be done about why we haven't done this for a long time. There's a psychic toll involved. It's why I'm not a foreign correspondent. I'm not built to discuss the worst of humanity every single day. I'm not built to fly to the places where man's inhumanity to man becomes unbearable and to bring it back for your attention. I have absolutely unbounded admiration and gratitude for the journalists that do that. They belong, in my mind, to an almost a different species of journalists. The Lise Doucet's, the Christiane Amanpours, the Jeremy Bowens, the John Simpsons, the list is long. And none of them have been allowed into the Gaza Strip, of course. When I suggested earlier, I didn't put you in Idiot's Corner, George, because I think it was just a genuine mistake on your part. I said that Israel wouldn't let any proper journalists into the Gaza Strip. And you said, what about all the Palestinian journalists that are there? And the ones that have died, are they not proper? So the point you're missing is they were there already. They are reporting from there because they were there. Israel won't let Channel 4, Matt Fry can't go. The BBC, John Simpson can't go. CNN, Christiane Amanpour can't go. They can't get in there, which means we end up in this mad situation where we rely upon the health authority run by Hamas to provide us with figures, and then Israel and its most vocal supporters say, you can't trust those figures, and you say, well, could you let us send in some journalists whose figures we could trust then? And they just go curiously silent. Why we haven't talked about it more is because it has reached a point of stasis almost, where it had... Same with Ukraine, by the way. We talked about Ukraine in the early days of the war every day. But there comes a point in a conflict where the casualties cease to be news. It's the most heartbreaking thing. They cease to be news because they've become normal. What's going on in Gaza? Israel's killed more people. Israel's killed more children. Israel's killed more humans. That's not news because that happened yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before. Hostages get rescued or released, but most recently rescued. That's news because it hasn't happened for a long time. It's the most cynical equation. I don't fully understand it. You may disagree with my analysis, But it's the only one, I think, that fits the facts, that makes sense. It ceases to be news. And you wonder whether Netanyahu kind of banks on that, knows that the public, the international disapproval, the international outrage will dissipate, will dilute, will diminish, even as his behavior continues. The ability, the appetite to keep shouting your outrage, your disgust will diminish. The international court will make an announcement. That's news. A week later, nothing's changed. Investigations continue. That's not news. That's not news. And that, I think, is just the way it goes. So some things that you may or may not be aware of, and this is from the World Health Organization, about 10,000 patients in Rafah are currently in need of evacuation. There used to be about 50 patients a day crossing into Egypt, but since the 7th of May, when Israel moved into the city, none have been able to do that. So there's about 10,000 people in need of evacuation who can't get evacuated. About a fifth of the Gaza Strip is still threatened by famine. I mean, a fifth of the population, a fifth, we must say, of the remaining population still threatened by famine. About 500,000 human beings facing the most severe level of food insecurity as deliveries are complicated by the continuing violence and restrictions. There's an independent monitoring group called the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. They say the humanitarian space in the Gaza Strip continues to shrink and the ability to safely deliver assistance to populations is dwindling. The recent trajectory is negative and highly unstable. The conclusions of international observers of the International Court is that I think the likelihood of war crimes having been committed by Israel has solidified. Obviously, war crimes were also committed by Hamas, but the continuing carnage in Gaza seems set to come to an end, or at least, if you like, the large-scale carnage seems set to come to an end, because the radio station operated by the Israel Defense Force stated in the last 24 hours, within a few days it will be possible to announce that Hamas's Rafah brigade has been defeated and the intensive phase of ground maneuver all over Gaza has been definitively completed. I mean, this despite the fact that thousands of Hamas militants have fled Rafah and haven't been killed or captured. The fighting only continues in a few neighborhoods, but they've been routed, if you like, if not defeated. So we, 11/11 is the time, find ourselves now perhaps contemplating the end game or contemplating a diminishment in hostilities, a dialing down of the carnage. The cost, the human cost, never mind the infrastructural cost to the Palestinian people, is immeasurable, close to immeasurable. I don't know that you will or we will ever get a full picture of how terrible this engagement has been. Pete suggests it'll take a decade to clear all the rubble. They'll be finding bodies for another 10 years. And the question I have for you today is what has changed? Now, I never really gave much thought to matters Middle Eastern until I got this job, until I started doing this for a living. And I've been on quite a strange journey in the years that you have been talking to me. But the idea that a disproportionate level of interest from people in the United Kingdom in what goes on in Gaza and in Israel is something that I completely understand. What I'm interested in today is people who wouldn't have phoned me or anybody about Gaza or Israel a year ago. Okay? So now I want to make this absolutely clear. I'm really interested in what has happened to previously ambivalent public opinion. Okay? So if you have been an ally of the Palestinian people for all of your life, since your student days, since the days of Yasser Arafat, if you have been a passionate ally, a passionate advocate of the Palestinian cause and a passionate supporter of the two-state solution, today is not your day. I want you to leave the space clear for other people today. And similarly, if your defense of Israel's behavior historically and currently has been in place for decades and is built upon that knowledge that as a Jew, the next time it starts, the next time the pogroms, the persecutions, the foothills of Holocaust begin to unfold, Israel is the place to which you can now go. That is your place of sanctuary, and therefore it is almost impossible for you to conceive of circumstances in which you would condemn Israel. Today is not for you either. If, however, your dial of opinion, that your strength of opinion on this has never really nudged much beyond 2 or 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, I really want to hear from you today. I don't know that there's much point ringing me to tell me that you're still ambivalent. I mean, by all means, let's see if that makes for an interesting conversation. But my view is, and in a sense it's a fear, I'm pretty close to certainty that Benjamin Netanyahu has cast Israel as an international pariah for at least a generation. You speak to young people who didn't know anything about this part of the world and didn't particularly care about what has happened, and there is a level of spluttering incomprehension coupled with rage about the casualty count, about the carnage, the pictures that get out, the pictures that we see. And what you've got to remember, I'm particularly interested in the younger people, actually, if you're listening, maybe you're the most obvious category here because you weren't engaged in Middle Eastern matters because they hadn't made the news while you've been politically conscious or while you've been a big-time consumer of the news. So you're in your late teens, your early 20s, and this that terror attack, the atrocity of October the 7th was the first time your attention had been dragged to that part of the world. And your attention stayed there as Israel's response escalated. Your attention has stayed there. What do you think now is the question I have for you about Israel or about the Palestinian people or about both. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 16 minutes after 11. You have to understand, I think, particularly if you're my age, that young people get a lot of their information from sources that are not traditional media. TikTok, you might think of it as a sort of, a site where people swap clips of themselves twerking, but TikTok is absolutely full of bite-sized political commentary, the massive majority of which that I've seen is incredibly sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, incredibly disgusted by what has happened in Gaza, and therefore incredibly negative towards the regime in Israel particularly, and sadly Israel itself in general. But I don't know how indicative that is of broader truths. My sense now is that Benjamin Netanyahu's self-interest has seen the promotion of far-right politicians to positions they should never have been allowed near, and a commitment to carnage in Gaza that was born of protecting his own political position no matter what. And that as a consequence of these combined events, the atrocities that have unfolded in Gaza have rendered Israel beyond, to use the words that the most senior Jewish politician in America used not long ago, beyond pariah for an entire generation of people. Now, you may object to me describing that as a tragedy, but I consider that to be a profound tragedy, precisely because of Israel's status as the place to which Jewish people go the next time it starts happening. And one thing you will learn if you spend time with Jewish people is that historical peril is part of character, part of the Jewish character for millions of people. Not for everybody, but for a hell of a lot of people who have a family connection to the Holocaust or to pogroms or to persecutions. That status of Israel is a thing of almost incomprehensible profundity. And that's why it's a tragedy that Benjamin Netanyahu has turned that country, has turned that sanctuary into a pariah state. A pariah state. You don't have to be Jewish to recognize the importance and the value of that sanctuary status. But it could never, or it should never have been allowed to provide a mandate for war crimes, ethnic cleansing, alleged genocide. It should never have been allowed to do that. However powerful that position is, it should never have been allowed to mandate Israel's atrocities in Gaza, and Benjamin Netanyahu did that. And that is why I fear, and you're more than welcome, in fact, I hope you do ring me up and tell me that I've got this wrong, but I don't really see how you can, because you'll be coming at it from a position of previously entrenched support for Israel. Somebody truly objective, somebody truly unbiased, somebody truly coming to this issue for the very first time is going to be able to unequivocally condemn the terrorist atrocity of October the 7th and set it against the atrocities that have followed, simply comparing death toll to death toll, casualty to casualty, comparing bomb to bullet, and see the scale of the apocalypse visited upon Gaza by Israel, and the opinion you then hold of Israel is, I think, almost inevitably, to use a mother of all understatements, almost inevitably negative. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. Phone lines are open, 0345 6060 973. How has the October the 7th terror attack and the subsequent atrocities in Gaza affected you as someone who didn't know much or care much about that corner of the world before October of last year? That's a crucial qualification, all right? 0345 6060 973. It's 20 past 11. It is 22 minutes after 11, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You only see one side of this argument, says Richard, but there's no argument here. It's just a question about how you, as someone who was not paying particular attention or was particularly invested in the tensions in the Middle East, particularly between Israel and the Palestinian people, before the Hamas terror attack of October the 7th, how has that and what followed informed your opinion? Where are you now? 0345 6060 973. John's in County Durham. John, what would you like to say?
Hi there, thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome. I'm on duty now. I have to police that requirement that contributors were not particularly invested in this issue before October the 7th, and that means that the older you are, the more suspicious I will be. But that's the bed I've made.
Yeah. Well, I'm 52. I'm not, and I never have been particularly invested in Palestine and Israel, but I am politically aware, so to speak, more about home affairs, really.
Yes.
And at the moment, I mean, first thing I'd say is it doesn't have to be that you have a partisan opinion about this. You can't. It doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be that you say, well, I'm very much on Palestine's side or I'm very much on Israel's side. It's perfectly possible to look at this, as I do, genuinely, through looking at it and thinking, well, I can see that Hamas's actions were dreadful. And I can see that Israel's actions since that have been equally dreadful, and not take sides. And at the moment, I feel genuinely completely hopeless about it, but I'm reminded that this is how I felt in the 1980s about Northern Ireland. You just looked across the Irish Sea and thought, that looks hopeless. They are two sides of the same coin, so to speak, and they absolutely hate each other, and they won't even sit in the same parliament building, the same building as each other, let alone round a table and talk about things. And there's really, for me anyway, there's strong parallels between the two. And until that changes, I mean, I suppose in the Good Friday Agreement, it was some really free-thinking politicians managed to make that happen, from America and from the UK, Mo Mowlam and John Major and Tony Blair and so on and so forth. And David Trimble and
John Hume
and Sinn Féin. It was amazing that it happened, and that's how I feel at the moment. I suppose all I'm clinging on to is that vestige of hope that it happened in Northern Ireland, and then perhaps it can happen in Palestine, Gaza, Israel as well.
Which I guess makes you an idealist, doesn't it? And possibly naive, but you're certainly not going to get any beef from me on whether or not that's a shared a shared desire. I mean, some of the differences, and this is where I depart from your position, because the idea of the United Kingdom responding to IRA atrocities by bombing everybody in parts of Belfast, for example, would be a more pertinent parallel with what Israel has done in Gaza.
It would, but then there would be people.
So you use the word equally to describe 1,200 people dying versus just shy of 40,000 dying, and I understand why you've used that word, but you can't mean it completely, can you?
Not mathematically, no. But it's just numbers. I mean, you're asking for people who are kind of impartial on it, and I'm sitting here however many thousand miles away from it, and I am that way. It's just numbers, and it's a horrible.
But it's not, though. It's lives. It's lives, and 40,000 lives has to have a deeper impact upon you than 1,200 lives, doesn't it? In some way.
Possibly. But what I would say, I mean, the thing that resonates more with me is the fact that it felt hopeless in Northern Ireland. It felt genuinely hopeless all the way through the 1980s. Yeah. It felt like something that just could never be solved, and we would always be here. And that's how I feel now about what's going on in Gaza. Is it just feels, looking at it from the outside, it just feels like two communities that have got absolutely nothing in common whatsoever, other than a mutual hatred that is so deep-seated it can never be fixed. But that's how I felt in Northern Ireland, and it was fixed, well, to a greater or lesser extent.
Listen, I don't know whether it's hopium or whether it is just optimism, but as I say, I can't argue with the desire that you have, but I don't see the parallels apart from in the intractable nature of the conflict, but the imbalance of power and the difference between it. A sovereign democracy and a prescribed terrorist group. They're just different stakes as well as different investments. But I hope you're right. I can't see that while Benjamin Netanyahu remains in power, any form of negotiation unfolding. And of course, some of the people in his cabinet have been pretty clear about wanting things to get worse, if you like, in Gaza, or wanting to settle Gaza as parts of the West Bank have been illegally settled. Marcia is in Harlesden. Marcia, what would you like to say?
Hi. So it's just to say that I'm afraid you're describing me completely when you talk about somebody who's completely ambivalent. I never really thought about Israel. Palestine, had very little understanding of what was going on over there. An old boss once mentioned to me, he's Jewish, and he had mentioned to me that his girlfriend at the time, when they had their conversation about getting married, her family were not happy and made a comment to her about, look what they've done for Palestine.
Because they were... So there was anti-Semitism there as well, presumably.
Oh, yeah. Right. And he kind of told me this, but my knowledge of that whole thing was so limited that I just kind of smiled when he said it and thought, oh, gosh, how odd. Yes. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation.
Yes. I think that's normal. I don't think it's something to apologise for. We respond to what impacts upon us, really, don't we? But then it did impact on us on October the 7th.
Oh, and it's just been horrific. And and again, I'll be honest, I've not watched loads of news. I've switched the radio off when there's loads of, it's got really graphic, the discussion around what's going on, because I found it so difficult to cope with the violence, actually, with the constant death by what feels like, just completely dehumanizing people. And it becomes, it goes from one death, one shocking death, to tens, then hundreds and thousands, and then it's babies, and then it's people who are pregnant losing babies, and it's all too much. And it's the same with my friends. All of us are kind of, we can't cope with this. It's too much. And when you ask the question about how it's changed me, well, I can't imagine. I suppose the picture, although limited, that I had of Israel was not the kind of place that this type of thing would be happening, where a government would be so rogue that it completely ignore the desires of populations that are campaigning and arguing for peace, arguing for hostages, that they just completely dismiss it. And where you would have people just doing pretty much whatever they want. I find it difficult to comprehend in what we think of as, I suppose, a democratic and sophisticated democracy, that things like that can happen, and that nothing seems to change. Doesn't matter what Biden says, and we pretend that we have all this power ourselves in the UK, that somehow, which we don't, because, Cameron clearly is not really having any impact at all. I think, I can't imagine James going on holiday there, let's put it that way. I'm not about to put a bikini on and go on a holiday and send my kids to university there.
I hear you, but could I mean, your opinion has crystallised in a relatively short amount of time. Do you think it could be reversed in a relatively short amount of time, or do you feel that your attitude towards Israel is there for the duration, as it were?
I'm a hopeful person.
Because if the regime changes, the anti-Semites that your former boss encountered are blaming a bloke working in Harlesden for the actions of the IDF in Gaza or the actions of politicians, and that's anti-Semitic. And I don't believe that I believe that this is very much, this disaster very much sits at the feet of the Israeli government. Yes.
And what is an extremely a government that seems to be, very extremist in its views, and, as I say, who are not listening to people. And I would hope that with a change of government, with something that goes back to a bit more normality, that they'll be able to get back. And, a lot of healing for people in Israel as well from this. This has been catastrophic. Yeah. And I can't imagine the amount of pain that those families are going through and that those communities are going through. And I think for me, it's I'm not going to say that I'll never say never, but
you've been shaken. You've been shaken, and
absolutely,
and more by what Israel has done because of what you've said, because of words like democratic and civilized and what sovereign, or whatever the word may be. That's a Western style government. Yeah. Not a terrorist organisation.
I thought they were better than that. I really did. Okay. I would have hoped they were better than that, right? And I think just some of the rhetoric has been so...
bits of it have been vile from
they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen. It's like hands in your ears. We're just going to do whatever. And the propaganda, the constant, to get to a position where you literally feel like you cannot believe a word that is said, because everything is so coloured by, an ideology.
I think that's why the conversation sometimes moves on as well, because it is either entrenched versus entrenched, or no conversation at all, which is why I need calls like yours on days like today, Marcia, and I'm very grateful to you. Late for the news, which was testament to how much attention I was paying to what you were saying. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 25 to 12. This is nicely put from Alex, who says, I love your last caller. She refuses to become immune or desensitized towards violence. That's and it is hard to avoid. I had quite a lot of unhappiness with the earlier caller who was talking about casualties as being just numbers. I think if you listened again, you'd realise that wasn't quite as callous as it could be construed as. Perhaps it was. It didn't strike me that way, but... I guess it's all in the ear of the beholder. This is from Mark, who writes, as a Jew, I am ashamed of Israel's response. Netanyahu has led a policy that will A, never work. You can't kill an idea. B, be morally justifiable. It's horrific to witness what is being done. C, it has damaged Jews not only in Israel but the world over. And D, most of the hostages have not been returned. He has been an absolute disaster. Of course, and obviously for Palestinians, but also for Jews as well. I am clearly making no excuses for Hamas, who also need to take huge responsibility for the terrible current position of the Palestinians, not just for the events of October the 7th. I mean, I can't police it closely, but I am particularly interested today in learning the positions of people who didn't really have one before. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Joe is in Leicester. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I listened to the last caller, and I think that I sort of was a little bit desensitized to the world, really, and what was going on with it all, because I think you could just get a bit world weary of all the terrible atrocities that go on over in the world. Came to my doorstep when my daughter left uni and went to work for a charity that was predominantly in Palestine, in Gaza, where there was dreadful poverty before the war, before all this happened. And she works in England. She doesn't work over there.
Right.
So she works in England, but so she sees they send her lots of pictures and communications and things through. And so she's only just left uni, and it's so some of the things that she's told me has had a massive harrowing effect on her and on us, and has woken me up and family up to what's happened. I think in particular, and I think lots of people remember this, the little girl in the car, she was escaping with her family, and all her family were killed, and the little girl rang to try and...
on the phone.
Yeah, she was ringing on the phone, and they have the transcript of that. So they tried to go and get her, and they killed all the people who tried to go and get her. So then they tried to go and get her again, and they killed all them, and then they tried to go and get her again, and they killed all them, and then eventually the little girl died with her family.
Yeah, this was Hind Rajab, wasn't it, I think?
And some of the pictures she sees, and I used to be a midwife, and she said, Mum, they're doing caesarean sections without any anaesthetic, any anaesthesia, any antibiotics, any oxygen, and everything, and it's just, I don't know.
It's almost unbearable as you describe it, and I guess the key difference between what has been happening in Gaza and what happened in Israel on October the 7th is the endlessness of it.
I think so, and as I spoke to the lady before you, that I thought that, and I've heard, people say, like, the Second World War, Auschwitz, all that would never happen now. We will never happen. We will always learn the lessons in history, and we are learning the lessons of history every day, and this will never, ever happen again. And we all have these wonderful parades, and we all get out our big shiny medals, and we all, all dance this, and then we have the pictures of what happened. And I've been to Auschwitz, but I think I'm living through this genocide. I'm living through this.
So it's a fraught word, genocide. It's a loaded word, and it is not yet.
But I'm living through this. Yes. I'm living through knowing that thousands of people are going through terrible, horrific nightmare on both sides.
It's changed you a bit, I sense.
And have we learned anything? Have we? Or are we always going to be at the mercy of politicians who run the country not only into the ground, but into making terrible decisions for us?
Or using human lives as pawns in a game of self-interest?
Absolutely.
Will your daughter stay in that job? It sounds quite traumatic.
God, can't you go marketing for Estee Lauder or something? I think it was going to be like, it was just like a little start up, in marketing.
Yes.
And she's got very, very passionate now.
This is the thing. This is what today's phone-in is about, really. It's about people who've been made aware of this situation, these historical tensions by the most recent events, and that historically there was always a both sidesism to it. There was, and of course, the atrocities of October the 7th remain fresh in everybody's memory. But I would have thought that for your daughter's generation, it's almost impossible to see it as balanced, to see it as a sort of a 50-50 type of scenario, because the actions in Gaza have been so close to unprecedented, actually, until you go for some of the broader historical parallels that you have every right to reach for, Joe. But equally, I'm keen always to remind people that word in particular, genocide, is incredibly fraught, incredibly difficult, and technically not applicable in this case yet. It may never be, but it's a judgment that the International Court will make. And the tale of Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old girl who was on the phone, the only one left alive in the car, hiding from Israeli forces among the bodies of her relatives, got through to emergency call operators, pleading for help, really, and then subsequently found dead along with her aunt, uncle, 3 cousins, and 2 paramedics who had been trying to rescue her. That was one of the worst moments in the whole story, wasn't it, in the whole episode. The other one, of course, was when the aid workers were killed. Well, there have been countless episodes, but when the actual aid workers were killed as well, in circumstances that were unconscionable. I just don't know how anybody, ambivalent or objective at the outset, could come away from this with anything other than a deeply negative view of the Israeli administration. And then, because we're humans, it becomes very difficult to separate the Israeli administration from Israel. But you have to try. You have to try, because the alternative is unthinkable. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are having a discussion that we have had before, but not quite in this fashion. It's a discussion about what attitudes have been born of the October the 7th terror attack in Israel and the subsequent atrocities in Gaza, and the opinions or the positions, the perspectives of people who didn't really have one before. 0345 6060 973. I read a couple of texts. They kind of water off a duck's back now, which is a mark of some sort of desensitization. James is whipping up the hate again for Israel. I'm talking about a 6-year-old girl who was murdered while talking to emergency service operators. I'm not whipping up hate for anybody. You're a bit ill if that's what you're hearing. I mean that. If that's what you're hearing when we talk about a 6-year-old being killed while hiding among the bodies of her dead relatives, then you need help. It is 11:48. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The question of where people who didn't have a strong position before have ended up is arguably the most important question of all. I can't believe I've never asked it before. Maybe I have, actually. Memory is not what it was. But the debate about Israel and Palestine has been confined to entrenched versus entrenched for as long as I can remember. It's why I guess those of us who can adjust our attitudes according to events, when the facts change, we can change our minds, have such a tough time discussing it, because you end up drawing the hatred or the anger of everybody. You describe your sincere reaction to one event, and one camp despises you because it's not sympathetic enough to their cause, and you describe your genuine reaction to another event, and the other camp despises you because you're not sympathetic enough to their cause. Or you are, to quote the character from earlier, you are whipping up hate against Israel when you describe what Israel is doing. Is it whipping up hate against Hamas to describe what happened on October the 7th? Because you think it is, if you've got even the vaguest logical consistency. But of course you haven't, because it's entrenched versus entrenched. So where would people, or where have people ended up who were not entrenched to start with? 11:49 is the time. Because I don't, and this is opinion, I don't see how you could not have arrived at the conclusion that Israel has been embarked upon a hideous course since, whether you want to pick the beginning of November or a little bit earlier or a little bit later. I don't know, but I just don't see how you can come away with any other conclusion. And of course, if you are entrenched, then you can shout, just free the hostages and everything will be fine, and ignore the fact that Netanyahu's made it abundantly clear that A, that's not his priority, and B, even if they were all freed, the carnage would continue. So I guess the facts matter, don't they? But we're talking largely about feelings. Sam's in Grove Park. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
I've had this conversation with a very close friend of mine. That he's British. He's a British Jew, but he has family in Israel.
Okay.
And we've had multiple conversations about this over the past 8 to 9 months. But the most recent one really sticks to my mind, because I would hope brings a more balanced view, because I myself am a minority, and we've had this conversation about multiple tropes I hear on social media. Why are you just protesting now? You weren't protesting against other things, like, for example, or you're anti-Semitic, or these hate marches, because Suella Braverman called them hate marches.
Yes.
And I strongly do not feel they are. And I feel like he's a very rational, reasonable person, but he thinks that. And we had this conversation about, Israel to many Jews is their sanctuary, their home space. Yes. Like they do not feel like Europeans, while the other side feels that they are Europeans coming to, become settlers in this place that doesn't belong to them. And I think, ultimately it comes down to them being either side believes that this land belongs to them, depending on how far back you go back in history. But, the lie about a land for a people without land, it's a lie, because there were people there. There were always people there. And
so do you? I mean, so you see yourself as someone who, prior to the latest eruption of violence, hadn't paid that much attention to it, and it brought your relationship with your Jewish friend into a new light, into a new space, an uncomfortable space. But your attitude to the country of Israel has crystallized or changed in the course of the last month.
Yes, because I wouldn't say it deteriorated my relationship with him, because I can't hold him accountable for another country.
No, of course not. Of course not. But you have been disagreeing with each other.
Yes. But it made me empathize for his side, because he doesn't see himself as, let's say, fully British, because he feels he's constantly otherized. Throughout history, Jews have been constantly otherized.
But that's a historical fact.
Yes, it is. But my side, it made me do research on the history of this, because of the war.
And then you come up against the, to you and to me, absurd claim that there is some sort of biblical justification for 21st century territory claims, and once you come up against that, and of course Netanyahu has invited people very much of that view into the very, very heart of government. Once you come up against that, then all bets are off.
Exactly. You can't unless you kick the people who live there who are not Jewish out. You can't have a Jewish land for only Jewish people. Like, you can't have a democracy elected land where you have a community, a group of community that aren't Jewish.
What of the events in Gaza then? How have you and your friend discussed them?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not supportive of Netanyahu, so please don't misunderstand me. Like, but to him, his point of view is this is life or death. Like, I hate what's happening there, but the alternative.
But if we don't do this, our survival, our very survival, and this is something that Hamas makes frequent statements to support. In fact, to say we will do more, we will do it again, we won't be happy until we've driven these people. And do you think he 100% believes it?
My friend believes that Hamas is going to kill them. No, he doesn't think that Hamas is going to kill all Jews. Right, although there is that threat, because it's been constant throughout history that they are otherized. But at the same time, he does not believe that if we give, because for me, I say, well, why don't you give them equal rights? Give the people who live there equal rights, because then you would kill Hamas in the sense of the ideology.
Two-state solution, as it were.
Yes. But he's like, well, there's not enough land to have a two-state solution.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because, the settlements in the West Bank are just being increased and increased and increased. It's not even a viable solution anymore.
So you've got a lifetime of confusion ahead of you, haven't you?
Yes, I suppose so.
And I mean that affectionately, because I was the same really until I got this job, which was a while ago now, and it was previous conflicts and previous engagements where I felt my position becoming what you've just described effectively. Thank you, Sam. It's 11:55. I'm cracking on, only to squeeze in at least one more call, maybe two. Keith's in Coulsdon. Keith, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Well, I'd like to take this for another point of view. As I said to your producer, I'm a former soldier. I served in Northern Ireland at the height of the Troubles in the 70s. Okay, I was, until very recently, a great admirer of the IDF, which had General Moishe Dayan.
Just soldier to soldier, as it were.
Yeah, soldier to soldier.
Okay.
Now, when October the 7th came, it reawakened various things that bits and pieces I'd thought about it in the past, and I thought, my God, the Israelis are not going to stand for this.
Yes.
I never imagined an army flying the Star of David to do what they're doing. It is the equivalent of when I was in Northern Ireland, of us saying, right, the Divis Flats is a known hiding place for senior IRA commanders.
Yeah.
Massive block of flats. If you don't know what the Divis is, it's a huge block of flats in West Belfast.
Right.
And it was a well-known place for this sort of thing. We used to spend a lot of time searching it, etc.
So there'd be IRA men holed up in there.
Oh, yeah. Senior IRA men, no names, no pack drill. They're all politicians now. And
well, that's almost a hopeful observation in a way.
Well, there are a few mad dogs over there. But
I know, but you knew that this building was often...
That particular building and various complete areas across the province were known IRA hangouts. Yeah. What the Israelis are doing, or sorry, what the government of Israel is doing, and because as far as I'm
crucial
concerned,
distinction.
There's a big distinction between someone of the Jewish faith and the government of Israel.
God, yes.
The current government of Israel. It's the equivalent of us taking tanks, artillery pieces, anti-tank guns, ordnance that's meant for the battlefield, and shelling a civilian housing complex with women and children in it. And then, if the RAF have got time, don't suppose you could get a few fighter bombers over it, dump on them as well before we go in. To me, the correct riposte to what Hamas have done would have been gone in on the ground like we did. Yes, you're going to lose lives, but it is the correct way that.
Well, they did both, I suppose, didn't they?
Yeah. But you don't go.
It's the ordinance. You're talking about the ordinance.
Look, it ain't soldiering to go and murdering women and kids. That's always been the difference between the likes of the British Army and, shall we say, certain other countries.
Yeah.
To me, the Israeli government are flying the wrong flag. It's the wrong colour, and I'll let you judge the three colours that I think it might be. I'm not going to mention the M word because
no. Well, if you are making that comparison, it's not. I don't think it's justified. I really don't. But
I don't know. Maybe I'm going too far.
I think you probably are. Well, in my view, is you definitely are going too far. But you know. For reasons that are both obvious and sometimes a bit complex, but your parallel with the Northern Irish situation I find irresistible, and because the other thing it does, the question, well, what would you have done then after the October the 7th terror attack? As if that's some sort of zinger and it closes down all conversation. You said, well, we would have responded in the way that we've responded to terror attacks throughout history, without killing tens of thousands of civilians.
Look. If we'd actually taken the brakes off everything in the province of Ulster, the world would have condemned us. We'd have been a pariah.
Well, would it, though? Do you know, oddly, it would have done, largely because of America, actually.
Exactly.
Otherwise, if it wasn't for America, who knows what might have happened in the 70s and 80s with
Well, I like to think that even all those years ago, my officers were
better than that.
More restrained,
better than that,
and better men than some of the members of Mr. Netanyahu's government. I apologise for the second analogy.
Okay.
Thinking about it, it's totally inappropriate.
Thank you. Good man. I could tell you were very emotional, which is why I didn't come after you like a rat up a drain pipe.
You know, I'm basically saying is that they have stained the reputation that the likes of General Dayan, David Ben-Gurion, people like that who fought for their people. I cannot think that they would approve of anything that's happening now. As simple as that, James.
Well, thank you. Drawing not only on your personal experience, but also on your understanding and knowledge of some of the IDF history. So I don't know if you qualify as having been previously ambivalent or previously objective, but it was an incredibly valuable contribution nonetheless. And thank you especially for recognising the discomforting or uncomfortable or unacceptable nature of one of the things that you said, and getting it withdrawn in real time. You get nowhere in British politics with that level of self-reflection and honesty. It's 12:01. 4 minutes after 12 is the time. Okay, what town or city is another little political teaser for you? What town or city in the UK would, in this election campaign, given the recent history of our islands, what would be the worst town or city or the worst constituency in the UK in which to speak warmly of Vladimir Putin? What I mean, I could add, and what party do you think that politician belongs to? But I'm not even sure there's much mystery involved in that anymore. I think the relationship between at least one party contesting this election and the Kremlin has become all too clear in recent days. But if I were to ask you which town or city in the UK, given recent British history, in which constituency would it be most outrageous to describe Vladimir Putin as very good, as in warm terms? It's a hook and tease for you, okay? You can text 84850 for the answer, or of course you can WhatsApp 0345 6060 973. So, and I will add a little question on what party or what party do you think anybody who did praise Vladimir Putin in what I would consider to be the most ridiculous, the most outrageous constituency in the country in which to do such a thing. I will add that to the mix as well. Let's see if you know. 6 minute crikey, a few of you do. I'm not giving away the answers just yet. I want to talk about something completely different now. What is really interesting about this research is that the people who've conducted it haven't really answered the question either. It wasn't their job to answer the question. It was their job to track the data. And the data shows the age at which children possessed of high ability, clever children, I'm going to say, okay? Clever children from poorer backgrounds drop back from their peer group, from their better off peers. I don't know why I find this stuff so interesting and important. I think it's because I'm adopted. I don't know that that's a particularly sparkling insight. I've shared it with you before, but I think, and I've spoken to other adopted people about this, I think we have sometimes, not always, we have a greater awareness of the path not taken. You know, the old Robert Frost poem, 2 roads diverged in the wood and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. What path would I have been on if I hadn't been adopted? I'd still be me. I'd still be made of the same cells. I'd still have the same DNA and the same skills and the same attributes and some of the same failings and flaws, although we don't know what nurture and nature does in these sort of circumstances. So I'd still be me, albeit with a different name. But if I'd had all sorts of different influences in my life, if I'd had less luck, less privilege, less advantage, I wouldn't be me in another sense of the word. So I do think sometimes that adoption plays a part in the fascination I have and the enormous empathy I think I have. You can't really describe yourself like that. But the fascination that I certainly have with clever kids who... Well, not even clever kids. I mean, I'm fascinated by the relationship between your circumstances and your future success. So, you know, it's the same impulse, really, that takes us into conversations about private education. But this study has found a clear, rapid decline in high-ability, low-income children's outcomes between a very specific age range. The ages between which things start going wrong compared with the wealthier group. And first question I've got for you. Yeah, it is. Deborah in Greenock says it's a sliding door moment. Yeah, it kind of is a sliding door moment. But what do you think the age is first? What do you think the age is? So here you've got, let's say, 10 clever kids. You've got 100 kids. Here are the 10 cleverest. 5 of them are poor, 5 of them are not. At what age do the 5 that are not poor move away from the 5 that are? Not all of the... Listen, we're dealing in broad brushstrokes, so don't pick me up on the pedantic points, okay? And don't text me to say, I'm from a very poor background and I'm very clever and I've done very, very well. We're talking about the data. We're talking about the statistics. 100 kids, 10 cleverest kids. 5 of them are poor, 5 of them are wealthy. At what age do the wealthy kids leave the poor kids behind? Between 11 and 14. So that's not shocking, right? That makes perfect. Secondary school, you'd kind of think, that would probably be where it kicks in. So it's during this critical 3-year period between the ages of 11 and 14 at which talented children from low-income backgrounds fall behind their wealthier peers at school. And this includes the same school. In fact, I think it's most interesting when it's the same school, because otherwise the answer is pretty obvious. Well, the rich kids went to private school and they had smaller class sizes so this is at the same school. By the time the two groups sat their GCSEs or equivalent at 16, the 16-year-old groups, the wealthier group had become much more likely to gain top grades than those in the low-income group. And they were also then, as a consequence, more likely to go on and take A-levels. Here are some of the things that happen to the kids from the lower income backgrounds. They're more likely to have contact with the police. They're more likely to have lower self-esteem. And crucially, they're more likely to have developed negative attitudes towards education. Now, I find this heartbreaking. I find it absolutely heartbreaking. I also find it very easy to believe. I mean, there's no reason not to believe it. The data is pretty comprehensive and the research is pretty far-reaching. But what's tragic about it, and there's a little bit of intellectual snobbery kicking in here, what's tragic about it is that these are the children who could have smashed through the glass ceiling, who could have challenged the status quo, who could have upended, if you like, the inherited privilege. They had the brains to do it, and they don't. They don't. Why don't they? 0345 6060 973. What happens between 11 and 14 that lets you or allows you to explain to me why this happens? Why these children of similar ability, similar high ability, move into a clear and rapid decline between the ages of 11 and 14. And remember that until the age of 11, this isn't happening. So some of the answers won't work, will they? Because you'll say, well, why wouldn't that happen when you were 8? Or why wouldn't that happen when you were 9? Academic rigour increases, but then at the minute that academic rigour increases, so the gap between the clever kids from poor backgrounds and the clever kids from wealthier backgrounds begins to grow exponentially. Okay? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I think my favourite caller would be the one who knows this is them. You know this is you. Do you know it? Do you know when it's happening? Can you feel it happening? I told you at 10 o'clock this morning that I would share a story with you that involves Sebastian Coe, which seems a little odd given what we're talking about. But it's a story I was told by a cab driver that I have never forgotten, a mini cab driver, that I have never forgotten. It was a long journey. I was doing some TV job, so it was like a 90-minute journey that he was driving me on. And listen, he may have been yanking my chain. I don't think he was, for the record, but the story just resonated with me in ways that very few stories do. And his was a story about being a middle-distance runner who grew up in care. And until roughly the age that we're talking about here, I think it was a little later, until sort of 13 or 14, he would regularly come up against Sebastian Coe in running races. And as he told the story, he would beat him as often as Sebastian Coe beat him. They were rivals. They were arch rivals on the racetrack, on the running track. And then the fact that he was growing up in care while Sebastian Coe, I think, was being coached by his dad. Then it all kicked in, and he would start going to less meets, and he couldn't train as easily, and he didn't have the kit, and he didn't have the access to the facilities. And at that age, he started falling back. I mean, when you think of it as a running race, it's literal, isn't it? You can visualize the gap between the two runners getting bigger. And this is the academic equivalent. And I can't conclusively state what it would be, why it would happen. 03456060973 is the number if you can. And I think curiosity is not quite the right word. What I am most fascinated by is what it feels like in the moment, I have such an amazing time doing my full disclosure interviews with famous people, and they focus more on childhood than they do on other things, on the bits of their life that for example. It's an interview series that looks at the bits of the life of a famous person that we don't know. I had a cracking one yesterday, which I think you'll hear next week, with Midge Ure from Ultravox and Visage, and of course Band-Aid and Live Aid. It was such a lovely bloke, actually, such a lovely bloke. But he kind of knew at school that it wasn't for him, and then subsequently found out when he started at secondary school that he had a really, really high IQ. And those sort of dice rolls of life, those roulette wheels of life, intrigue me so much. They fascinate me so much, because someone with a high IQ who wasn't producing the goods at school, at a state school, a normal state school, will have a completely different life from someone who went to a school like mine. It is fascinating to me about the difference that these external factors can have on almost every aspect of your life. So, well, you know what we're talking about. Do you know when it's happening to you? Can you feel it happening between the ages of 11 and 14? And you go from being top of the class and you start sliding down. And you kind of know it's happening, but there's nothing you can do about it. 12:16 is the time. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need, okay? It is 17 minutes after 12. A lot of Midge Ure fans out there. That full disclosure will be dropping next week. I think this week's interview is with Nick Lowles, who runs Hope Not Hate, a particularly interesting time for them and an organisation for which I have absolutely boundless admiration. Some incredibly brave people working there. Almost everyone got this right, with a couple of exceptions. In which town or city or which constituency in this country would be the most outrageous constituency in which to fanboy or fangirl for Vladimir Putin? The answer, as many of you have correctly identified, is Salisbury. And this did actually happen. A candidate in Salisbury did indeed describe President Putin as seeming very good. Warm words about the president in the city where Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia, of course, were poisoned with Novichok, a nerve agent, in 2018 by Russian spies, and where a woman died as a consequence of stumbling across coming across the nerve agent. I have actually met Putin and had a 10-minute chat with him, and he seemed very good, said this character at a hustings in Salisbury on Sunday. You can see a full list of candidates in Salisbury, and it was inevitably the Reform UK candidate that said these words. You can see a full list of candidates in Salisbury at lbc.co.uk/candidates. At 19 minutes after 12 is the time. Let me just check that. Have we got a full list of all? Can we get a full list of all the candidates in Salisbury, please? Or I may even read them out, just because of political paranoia. But we're talking instead about why poorer, high-ability children in the UK, by the way, fall behind their peers from about the age of 11. What happens and what's it like? Sarah's in Harlesden. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Sarah.
I'm a child of poverty. I grew up with
a child prodigy?
A child of poverty.
Oh, forgive me. I was going to say, are you allowed to describe yourself as a child prodigy? I don't know. A child of poverty. Forgive me. Carry on, Sarah.
Yes. So I grew up in a one-parent family on benefits.
Right.
I was a very clever child, but what happens between the age of 11 and 14 is you become conscious of your impoverishment. You don't want to go to your rich pals' homes because you can't return the compliment. You can't invite them back to yours because you're probably living in, not as grand a circumstance as they are.
Yes.
Also, they've got clothes, nice clothes to wear at the weekend or off duty when they're not in their school uniform. If you're a child who comes from an impoverished background, it's like you're hidden. You have your impoverishment is veiled by your school uniform Monday to Friday.
Yeah, of course.
So you don't want to rock up to events and you're wearing shabby clothes in comparison to your friends. So you become conscious of your poverty.
Right.
Also, it's the tall poppy syndrome. I think, sorry, I'm so nervous.
Hey, it's only me. What are you nervous about? You used to be a child prodigy.
I think it's because I lack confidence, because I am a child of poverty, and I think that's the issue.
Yeah. And that starts kicking in around now. I mean, that confidence, because whatever the opposite of confidence is what you feel when you start comparing your circumstances to your peers.
Correct. And also, it's that thing about being at school when you hit puberty, so it's happening younger and younger to children.
Yes.
But also, you want to be invisible. You want to fly below radar. You don't want to give people an excuse to bully or pick on you.
Right.
And being clever attracts bullies because they want to bring you down to their level.
But a wealthier kid would be less bothered by that?
They're armoured. They're armoured because their parents are drilling them with self-confidence, self-esteem. They get access to lots of experiences that poor children don't, i.e. holidays, foreign holidays, that kind of thing. And I think your money, that protects you from a lot. You can pay for lots of problems to go away if you come from a middle-class family. And there was a third point I wanted to say. So this data that's just been produced, the thing is, children are becoming much more sophisticated at a much earlier age. So this age group, those figures will drop. Children will become much more aware of their impoverishment at a much earlier age, simply because they've got access to iPads, all that kind of stuff.
That makes perfect sense. Go on.
And there was one final point I wanted to make. Sorry,
You've killed my whole topic now. You've done it all. I've got nothing left. Am I going to have to go home early? Can someone pay Sheila Fogarty, please? Sarah's just answered absolutely every element of this entire subject.
I've got two boys.
Yeah.
So one is 3 and one is 5. And what I would say is that, so the 5-year-old has started primary school. So I take the view that everyone at primary school are just really lovely kids, regardless of their background.
Yeah.
I think, as a parent, I'm definitely going to police their peer group once they hit secondary school. And I will be that parent
to keep away bad influences.
Correct.
And that probably breaks down most easily on wealth. Because, I mean, the kids at I went to public school. There were some right old rascals at my school. So there were plenty of bad influences at public school. But what?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we work on the presumption that the bad influences are more likely to be from the poorer families because of the reasons that you've just described.
Correct. Yes.
Gosh.
And
why? The only bit I don't get is. Well, two things. Are you aware of it happening at the time? Are you aware of the kid? You see them moving further away from you. And secondly, why would you take your foot off the pedal? To attract less attention? I get that. You don't want to be bullied for being clever. But are you conscious of that at the time? Are you conscious of thinking, I'm not going to do my homework as well as I could, or I'm not going to put my hand up in class as much?
My mother was very poorly educated.
Right.
She came from Ireland, could barely read and write.
Yeah.
She had no aspiration or ambition for me. She couldn't help me with my homework.
Gosh.
Oh, God, I think I might cry.
I know, that's fine. I think I might. That's absolutely fine, because you speak with great love as well.
I loved her so much.
I know, I know.
If you don't have that help, if you don't have someone pushing you on, and also as a child, I think you're completely oblivious to the fact that your choices that you're making in secondary school are going to impact your wealth as an adult. You don't realise that high grades probably equal a university education, probably equal a well-paid job if you join one of the professions. I don't think you're aware of that, but you're certainly aware of your impoverishment as a child.
Sarah, so many people saying that you're describing them in my messages. This was me, James. I was fast-tracked in primary school. Home life was tricky. Dad was a drinker, a top of my class, but as a teen, it all slipped away. Had an abortion at 15. Between 11 and 14. Makes perfect sense to me. This is my life that Sarah is describing. Do you wonder much?
And I just want to say, I feel bad that I'm going to police the boys' peer group because I want them to do so much better than I did. I want them to achieve so much more than I have. And I will be snobby and I will be excluding people, but I just want to protect them.
Good luck.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
Are you all right? Thank you, Sarah. 12:26 is the time. Oh, crikey, do we add much to that? Dan's in Gainsborough. Dan, what would you like to say? Is Dan there? Michael's in Cannock. Michael, what's on your mind? What made you pick up the phone?
It was the point where you were talking about falling off and like kind of neglecting academia.
Yeah.
I'm from a rather, it's not poor. My dad made a good income, but he spaffed it all at the wall. So,
okay.
So when my mum split up, she was working 3 jobs to try and get me and my brother through it.
Okay.
And I'm autistic, and I've always had speech issues when I was younger.
Okay.
So I was in speech therapy, so I wasn't the brightest star in school. But now, as a 27-year-old, I'm about to start a scholarship PhD.
Right.
So the intelligence was there.
Yeah.
But I hated school. I hated the topics, and I was bullied. So when I started coming into puberty and year 8 and stuff, I just wanted friends. I didn't want good grades because I was just going to do what my dad did. I was going to be an electrician. Like, I didn't need to get A's and B's.
So this is a sort of poverty of aspiration. Well, there's nothing wrong with being an electrician, but in your own mind, the socioeconomic status of home put a limit on your aspirations, as it were. Is that what?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I really wanted to fit in. I really wanted to be in the big social groups.
And what did that involve?
In lessons, we scrolled the internet looking at memes,
God,
having laughs.
You are young, aren't you?
Well, I'm not. It was the first generation of memes. It was.
I hear you. But what would you have been like if you'd come from a middle class functional family? Mum and dad didn't need to still be together, but dad took proper interest. The money wasn't tight. What would you have been like at school then?
It was having things to do. So I might have been the same with the money. So it might be coloured by the autism.
Okay.
But
I suppose you might have got more specific help in a sort of sharp-elbowed middle class family. Mum or dad might have made more inquiries or made more demands on the school. Maybe, I don't know, to accommodate you.
I was never really interested in what the school was teaching me. Like I'm doing my degrees and my focuses are all in Roman history.
Oh,
and
wow.
European.
Yeah.
So I never got taught Latin. That would have changed my life.
Good. I never thought of that before.
So I had to do all this in a later age. But in year 9 and stuff, I can't even remember anything that I was taught. It was just sitting in French, throwing pens at people, and after school we'd all be sitting on a field, and all of my peers were going off and doing drugs and smoking and drinking.
And if you're from a wealthier background, which I was, and I was a naughty child as well in some of the ways that you described, but you could still get the grades. It wasn't a choice between the two, actually. Whereas for you, you're flirting with that. What's the point of GCSEs? What do you need GCSEs for? And what you would get in a wealthier family, often, not always. These are not cast in stone. They're likelihoods. You wouldn't be able to get away with that at home. You know, like Sarah talking about her mum just not having the tools with which to help her her education, just not having the tools, and you clearly having the brains. I never thought of Latin in that way. You know, I did an O-level in it. Thank you, Michael. I'm moving on only because I'm a little late for the news, and I just want to run through a full list of all the candidates standing in Salisbury. Matt Aldridge for the Labour Party, Victoria Charleston for the Liberal Democrats, John Glenn for the Conservative Party, Chris Harwood for the Climate Party, Julian Malins for Reform UK, Barney Norris for the Green Party, and Arthur Pendragon, I wonder what had happened to him, is running as an independent. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. It is 34 minutes after 12, and privilege is sometimes a form of insulation, isn't it? You just don't know. I don't know why I grew up like this. Just really resenting the idea that we weren't lucky. I was surrounded by kids at schools like mine. You've heard it a lot during the debate about Labour putting VAT on private school fees. We work bloody hard, and you're sort of, well, what do you think the fella over the road who's working night shifts does? Do you think he doesn't work hard? But you don't know about the sort of soft privilege, the soft advantages of just having parents at home who take an interest in your education, or who read books, or who have, as Sarah so beautifully described it. And Sarah, if we had awards for most popular callers, you'd be top of the charts at the moment, judging by the response that's coming in on emails and texts. I find conversations like this so helpful, and hopefully other people do too. Dan's in Gainsborough. Dan, what would you like to say?
What I'd like to say is sort of further to what Sarah said regarding the side, but also...
We're going to have to do something about your phone, Dan. Sorry, mate. I don't know. It was just glitching in and out, and I was only catching about one word in 3. I'm sure it's not your fault. We'll do our best to come back to you. Rebecca is in Harpenden. Rebecca, what made you pick up the phone?
I was thinking, you just sort of said one of the things that I was going to say.
I'll say it again.
I think, this is about homework and what happens in the home.
Right.
That is the big thing that differentiates those who are lucky, well off, comfortable with those from a less wealthy background. And you were talking about parents who are supportive, and parents like you who've been to university and...
my parents didn't go to university, but also if you're rich and you send a child to public school, boarding school, you don't actually have to be a particularly committed or good parent. You're palming off all of those responsibilities on other people, paying for it and securing the knowledge that they'll come out with good qualifications at the end of it.
And the other thing that happens when you're at private school, as you know, James, is you do your prep. And you have access to the school library and the school, well, perhaps not in our day, but nowadays the access to the school
so that's
library.
That's one distinction. But why would? But this is more about children that are at the same school, drifting apart, drifting ahead. But you're right; it's going to have a lot to do with attitudes at home that are informed by wealth,
and not just attitudes. I mean, I'm reasonably well educated. Yes. You're better educated than me. Wow. The idea that I would be able to sit down and do maths homework with a 5-year-old, I struggle with. But
I was all right till they were about 9 with the maths.
And then you've got new maths.
Maths is probably not the best example. What's your perspective on this? What's your interest in the subject?
I deal with a lot of teenage mostly boys. I recruit for the army.
Oh, wow.
From 15 to 19.
Oh, gosh.
And you meet some very, very bright young men who've just not had access to, basic stuff like a table to sit at to do their homework, that they share a bedroom with 3 brothers.
Yeah.
They haven't got a computer.
Just think about that for a minute. Because just as you said those words, Karen texted to say, if you have to share your bedroom with siblings, homework is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Straight away. That wouldn't have crossed the mind of anybody who has not faced that problem. You would never stop to think, what would it be like if there was nowhere for me to do my homework? And as soon as that light is shone on the subject, it comes alive. You understand it better.
And there was a thing do you remember at the beginning of COVID when they were talking about remote teaching?
Yeah.
And suddenly there were people rushing around saying, there are some children who don't have broadband at home. They don't have computers. They're still there.
Yeah.
These lads, well, mostly lads for us, but girls and boys who are bright, and you can tell they're bright.
How can you tell?
But talking to them, their attitude, their engagement with, wanting to join the army, wanting a better life. They see the army as a better life.
Right.
Some people may disagree with that.
Well, it depends what you're comparing it to, doesn't it?
Where you're coming from as to where you're going.
Yes, exactly.
They really want that, but they feel, they couldn't do well at school because they didn't, I asked them to fill out forms online and they can't do it because they haven't got a computer, so they have to.
So there's a consciousness. There's a consciousness of loss, or there's a consciousness that they could have done more.
Not really.
That they could have done more.
Possibly. I don't necessarily see that it's a consciousness that they've missed out.
Right.
In a way, it is what it is. I think it's acceptance of almost their lot in life.
Yeah.
But it is. I think school should end at whatever time it ends, 4:00, because that is where the equality is, and that's where it starts at the age of 11, when kids start having proper homework.
And that's when the first big distinctions kick in. Just the simple environment in which you can do your homework, or the support or the help that you'll get with your homework.
The support, both personal and technological, and books, and I don't know.
No,
I don't
you
know.
do know.
James,
You do. No, I've got it. And that some of the young people that you're dealing with will be almost trying to sort of make up for the falling behind, catching up, as it were, in some sort of status or socio-economic kind of way. Thank you, Rebecca. Rick's been in touch. Says, this topic is me all over. I'm getting a lot of messages beginning with lines like that, especially since Sarah spoke. I'm from a not very well-off single-parent family. I was a smart kid, always in the top sets, but once I hit 13, it felt like school let me down as they started to focus on who they thought would do well instead of everyone. And it was always the kids who were more well off. So I lost focus on my schoolwork. I found school was becoming a waste of time in my mind. Got a job working in a chip shop until midnight on school days, just for something to do. So when my GCSE results came in, they weren't as good as predicted, and all the teachers started to ignore me in class and were critical of me for falling below their expectations. Nobody took any responsibility for what was happening to me. Thank you. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to read a lot of these messages, actually. Richard's in Coventry. Richard, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, thanks for taking the call.
You're very welcome.
From my own experiences, which I can only talk about my own experiences, is that I found, say roughly at the ages that we're talking, 11 through 14, that these places weren't for me, not the educational point, but I was struggling to read. The school didn't really pick up on it, so it was easier for me to become the class clown.
Right.
It was easier for me just to...
So you weren't, because this isn't a criticism, it's just a clarification.
Yep.
You didn't hit 11 as one of the clever kids then in class?
No, not at all. So, right. I mean, my background, single parent, like a lot of them have said, but when I kind of thought about this, a lot of it was just that when I got to, say, a certain age, when I talk about starting secondary school, I realised I couldn't keep up math-wise, I couldn't keep up with English. I couldn't keep up with any of the subjects. One of the classes, I used to get out my guitar and just play guitar and sing.
Right.
I'd get into trouble for it, but that sort of solved two problems. I got bullied less because some of the bullies liked the fact that I would be a distraction in the class, and I was, and I didn't have to do some of the work. A lot of it was not supportive at home. I'm not blaming the home for it, but not having that support, not having the space. I was moved around a lot. I think I went to 5 primary schools before I got to secondary schools. But you don't feel that you fit in. You don't feel that you're the same as these people. You feel below these people.
Do you really? Even at a young age, you've got a subconscious sense of inferiority.
Absolutely. I knew not to ask to go on school trips. I knew these things weren't for me. I carried all of this through to my mid-20s.
What changed?
And I met a new person. I realised I was an idiot. My behaviour was terrible. No, really.
I hear you.
I say to, when you meet the right person, you want to be the best person you can be. And so it was like a relationship in my late 20s. I realised I was about to ruin this as well. Because up until that point, a lot of things I did ended up, like being toxic, breaking things, if that makes sense.
Yes, of course it does. Yeah, you've got undiagnosed frustration, fury.
Yes, no, I'm 54 now. I set up business. I do okay. My son is in a private school,
right.
And the difference is. So one of the things I said to the lady I spoke to prior to yourself is I didn't really have any decent role models in my life.
Okay.
I had no one to tell me how, why, what. I just found a coping mechanism in the school because I couldn't fit in. So I found a way to resolve that problem, to be a joker, to pick up the guitar, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But I'm explaining to my son, life it gets more difficult as you get older. These things are important, so he's got a good, I'm saying he's got a good role model. He's got lots of good role models.
He's got better role models than you had. That we can say with some confidence.
And more of them as
you can't be what you can't see, Richard.
That's right. That's right. That was so. I mean, for anyone who was a bit younger and struggling and think that they left. So, in my 30s, I did a master's degree in computers, by the way, and realised I wasn't thick after all. It took me. I felt dirty through my.
Realised I wasn't thick after all. Isn't that a heartbreaking phrase for someone in their 30s?
Yeah, I was. But I felt dirty. I felt like I set up a business. And I felt like to the community because, I felt I'd improved myself, but I wasn't improved at all.
And you're describing self-sabotage psychologically. That's what you were doing before. That resonates with Chris and other people who've been in touch while you were talking. Richard, good luck to you, man. And to your boy as well, because you provide evidence of, is it renewal, redemption? I don't know, reversal. Anyway, whatever it provides evidence of, it definitely begins with R. Take care, mate. Thank you. It is 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Quite a few of you picking up on my full disclosure interview with Angela Rayner as an explanation of what we're talking about here. And do you know what? You're absolutely right. I absolutely touched on some of these subjects with her, and the difficulty that perhaps middle class people, or whatever phrase you prefer, people like me, have in understanding what life is like. In other circumstances, if you can't be certain of a space in which to do your homework, even, let alone an adult who might be able to help you with it. The reasons why clever kids start falling behind their wealthier counterparts from the age of 11, and by the age of 14, it's pretty much over, are becoming clearer with every call. I love this from Daniel. It says, I've never felt so seen as I do with this topic. It's hard to notice what you've been without before you hear other people discussing the same problems you've been through. It gives me a real sense of relief to know that there are reasons, there are things wrong with me. Oh, mate. And Karen writes that I feel like I've just been to therapy and had a group hug. And I think just acknowledging it is so helpful sometimes. Just saying, I'm sorry to bring it back to me, but you just say I'm lucky. Like, you get to do the VAT conversations. It's always about how hard you work to send your children to private school. So just say, I'm bloody lucky. I can afford to send my children to private school. I'm bloody lucky. My parents could afford to send me to private school. Just shut up about how hard you work. Honestly, you might have won the lottery. Who knows? You might have inherited it, or it could be the grandparents paying the school. I don't want to hear about how hard you work. Just say, I'm really, really lucky. And that's not fair. which is why the policy on VAT, the policy on 20%, just makes the world fairer, because it takes some of the, it reduces the number of the lucky, which is easy to say if you're still going to be all right, I suppose. 10 to 1 is the time. Leslie's in Nutfield. Leslie, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, hi, James. Lovely to talk to you.
Likewise.
My son is now 37, but when he was 4, he was diagnosed with...
And again, the phones are coming for me today. The phones, they've all got it in for me. John's in Eastbourne. John, what made you pick up the phone?
Hey, James, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Just listen to that. That's crystal clear phone line. That's amazing. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to jinx it.
I'm near a window.
That'll be it. Go on. What's on your mind?
Just like a lot of people, a lot of things that I've been suppressing are coming up. So I may cry at any moment.
Hey, feel free.
So
may I.
And this isn't. I don't have any regrets about this. As it turned out, my life has turned out great.
I understand.
However, so when I was growing up in Hull, I was labelled stupid, difficult and lazy at school.
Yeah.
And that was because I was dyslexic. So the dyslexia was completely missed and just labelled as stupid. It turns out I've got an IQ of 152 and I'm in Mensa now. And that was labelled as difficult because I asked questions and spoke back to teachers. And I've now realised I've got ADHD as well. So I was very unmotivated unless I was very interested in the subject, which I wasn't interested in most of the subjects.
And dysregulated.
And dysregulated, yeah. So school was a nightmare for me, really. I didn't make friends easily, and we were poor. I'm from a poor working class family. Parents weren't very educated, hard workers. Dad has ADHD, I now know. Right. So there wasn't much encouragement. My parents were amazing. They encouraged me to follow my passions,
right,
but they didn't particularly encourage me to be academic. And there was one particular moment where my maths teacher was also my computer studies teacher. This is the early days of computers, teaching basic. I think the whole computer studies course was 40% programming and 60% the history of computers.
Right.
And I love computers, so I suddenly had something I was passionate about. And for my exam, I wrote a really complicated program, and I did some really complicated maths in it. And he called me into his office to say, "Why are you cheating? Why are you cheating in your computer studies?"
He'd seen no evidence of you in maths having.
I was failing maths. I'd slipped to the last step in his maths because I wasn't interested. Just had no interest in just doing maths for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But I had to solve a complicated problem, and apparently I came up with a complex quadratic equation. And rather than assume I look back and I think he could have thought, maybe John's smart.
I could help this lad.
He just looked at that. He's stupid. He's dyslexic. Well, he's not dyslexic. He's just stupid. So he just pivoted to I cheated, and that was the point where I just gave up on school.
Would you, if you had a less dysregulated attitude or a more comfortable home life, would he have treated you differently?
I think he would. I think I was dismissed.
I think he would as well.
I think it's a mixture of things. It's not one thing, but I think if I'd have been less dysregulated, if I hadn't been labelled early on. I mean, my spelling was and still is atrocious. I got into trouble every single day for bad spelling at school. So that was my life at school. I'm going to go into school and get into trouble for this spelling thing. But at no point did anyone of the teachers try to fix it. So I've got high IQ, so I'm like, at the time I'm thinking, well, there's no point in me worrying about this because I don't know why I can't spell. I'm the kid who can't spell. I don't know why I can't spell. And the teachers are just telling me off but not helping me. So I kind of disengaged. Weirdly, I was failing all my exams. I was pretty chilled about it because I'm smart enough to realise what's the point of getting stressed about it, luckily. But I ended up getting a job with British Aerospace, like the second biggest employer in the area, because they didn't have any faith in the education system and they did their own IQ tests.
Oh, that's interesting.
Before the exam results were in. So I went to my last exam with a job offer from British Aerospace.
Because they'd done aptitude tests and seen something that your teachers had missed for your entire school career.
Yeah, it freaked everyone out because I was the guy who, everyone was like, what's he going to do?
It's a different type of luck. And a much rarer kind of luck that opportunity was there and that they spotted what you had. And of course, had you come from a wealthier background, you'd have had... 10, 20, 30, 40 bites of various different cherries before finding the thing that fitted for you. And I love that story, John. I'm moving on only because I want to squeeze in at least one more call. Leslie is in Nutfield, hopefully on a better phone line. Leslie, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, guys. Yeah, it's now 37 years of age.
It's not going to happen, is it? Sorry, Leslie. It's not your fault, but the phone line, I don't know what happened. Maybe you fell down a well. Diane is in Tarporley in Cheshire. Diane, what would you like to say?
Hi, I think I just want to give Sarah a little bit of hope. Brought up on the benefit system, getting home from school in year 10 on a Friday, told that you're going to a new school on Monday in another town, which is halfway through your GCSEs, which was not easy. Different books, different subjects. Coursework I'd missed for a whole year, wasn't great. Went to try to go to sixth form. No, you've not got the grades, but do this BTEC, which I did.
Right.
Mum said, no, you have to go to work. So I moved in with my dad in another town, walked 3 miles to the station every day to get to school. Halfway through my BTEC, my dad chucked me out and I had to go and live with my mum. And I begged my mum to let me finish the course, which she did. But I do remember the day I got a distinction in BTEC, I didn't want to show the results because I was still mad at my parents.
For not helping you more.
For not helping me. I had 3 younger siblings, come home from school, look after the kids, no time for homework. There's no way I could study Julius Caesar in 8 months and get a good grade in English. But I just wanted to let her know, since that experience, I have supported my kids through education from day one. I trained to be a teaching assistant, followed them through primary school. They've both just left university in the last few years. My eldest works for The Guardian. And my youngest...
no, I thought it was going to have a happy ending, Diane.
Yeah, sorry. but she did it. We supported her. That's what she wanted to do. Every subject they chose, go for it, go for it, go for it. My youngest has got 2 degrees and she's a charity worker. They are thriving.
And you I hope, give yourself some of the credit for this because of the care with which you've nurtured them. And it was a nurture that you were denied when you were little.
Yes.
And that's why it's a story for Sarah to take on board. And what you describe is the breaking of the cycle, isn't it, Diane? And of course, what we've heard from a lot of other people is the repetition of circumstance. It's a bit chicken and egg. So the adults who didn't have a good time at school become parents, and they are therefore less likely to be wealthy and less likely to have the vocabulary of assistance to give to their own children. And then the cycle repeats itself. But then along come you, Diane, or a Sarah, or many of the other parents that we've spoken to today who used to be children from poorer backgrounds, and you can actually break the cycle, which I didn't realise when we started off on this conversation would turn out to be the whole point of it. Breaking the cycle is what has become the point of this conversation. Just a word to everybody who's been in touch to say that this is the first time you've ever really heard the subject discussed and realised that it is a subject about you. Thanks for doing this topic. It's really encouraging and uplifting to hear from people similar to me. I was a poor kid on a bursary at a private school. Parents split up. I have a paralysed eye, generally had an inferiority complex, aged 11 to 13, difficult and transformative years. It's really helpful for me to be mindful of the less obvious things that can set people back and try to be more supportive. A lesson for us all there, Chris. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 But now it's time for Sheila